let's start. Okay, so paper Feb-March 2019, variant 1-2. Question number 1. The Boltzmann distribution is shown for a sample of gas at an initial temperature T1. Now, you know that as we change the temperature, the curve will also shift. Yes, what should, however, stay the same is the number of molecules, total number of molecules that is represented by the area under the curve, right? So now they are saying that this curve is at temperature T1. What will be the curve at T2, which is a higher temperature? So at a higher temperature, what will happen? Just like at higher temperatures, things expand, the curve will also expand. It will expand, so it becomes wider. So the number of molecules should stay the same. Area under the curve should stay the same. So if it's becoming wider, the height will decrease. Yes? So it will become wider and it will decrease. Yes? So this will be at T2, where the temperature has increased. So the curve becomes wider, but it decreases in height. Therefore, the topmost point shifts to the right and downwards. Yes? Do you see the topmost point of the curve? It shifts to the right and downwards. And also, do you see now more particles have energy greater than activation energy, therefore more successful collisions and the rate will increase? Yes? And what will be, just saying that if you decrease the temperature, what do you think the curve would look like? If you decrease the temperature, just like everything contracts when you decrease the temperature, the curve will also contract. It will contract, so it will become narrower. Since the number of particles should stay the same, area under the curve should stay the same. As it's becoming narrower, it will increase in height. So it will increase in height. And what will it look like? It will look like this. Do you see now the particles having energy greater than activation energy have decreased, and the topmost point shifts where? It shifts to the left and upwards. Yes? Do you see it shifts to the left and upwards? This is T3, let's say at a lower temperature. Now they're saying which of these shows the one at T2 at the higher temperature. So T2, now we can just read these values, read like this is 1, 2, 3. This is roughly at 3 point something, the actual T1 graph. So T2 should be lower than that. Yes? So this is 1, 2, 3. This is kind of the same as the one that is at T1. So this can't be the answer because it's the same as T1. Yes? Let's see graph B. 1, 2, 3. It's a little lower than 3. Do you see that? And that's what we should expect. Yes? Let's see the other options. 1, 2, 3. It's again higher. It's much higher. Do you see the topmost point is higher than 3 point something? It's even higher than T1. But we know for a higher temperature, it should be lower. Yes? So can't be C. And D, do you see D resembles T3, which is at lower temperature. So D is at a lower temperature, not at a higher temperature. Therefore, your answer is B. Clear? All right. Moving on to the next question. Question number 2. A 3.7 gram sample of copper 2 carbonate is added to this much of hydrochloric acid. Which volume of gas is produced under room conditions? So let's write the equation. You have copper 2 carbonate. Copper is copper 2 plus, carbonate is CO3 2 minus. So what will be copper carbonate? Copper carbonate will be CuCO3. You react this with HCl. So when you add this to HCl, carbonates with acid will give you what? Carbon dioxide, salt and water. So you will get CuCl2, water and carbon dioxide. Let's balance the equation. You have 2 Cl's here, so you will put a 2 HCl here. It is balanced. Now they've given you the mass of copper carbonate. Can we convert the mass to moles? How will we do that? Moles is equals to mass upon molar mass, or the MR. The mass is 3.7. Let's find the MR. The MR would be copper, which is 63.5, plus carbon, which is 12, and oxygen, which is 16 times 3. So this will be 63.5 plus 16 times 3 plus 12. This is 123.5. So 3.7 divided by 123.5. the moles of copper carbonate are 0.0299 moles. Roughly 0.03 moles. Yes. So these are the moles of copper carbonate. Can we find the moles of HCl? We've been given the concentration and volume. So we can do N is equals to C times V. So let's do that. Concentration is 2. Volume is 25 upon 1000. So 25 upon 1000 times the volume times the concentration, which is this. The moles come out to be 0.05 moles. Now, when the quantities of both the reactants are given to you, your product will always depend on the limiting reagent. So you need to find your limiting reagent. So let's see which one will be the limiting reagent. You can see the ratio of copper carbonate to HCl is 1:2. How many moles of copper carbonate do we have? We have 0.0299 moles. So for this to react by this ratio, how much HCl will be required? Let's see. So 0.0299 times 2, this comes out to be 0.0598 moles of HCl which are required. And how many are given to you? You've been given 0.05. How much do you require? More than that? So can we say that HCl is the limiting reagent and the product always depends on the limiting reagent? And you can see the ratio of HCl to the volume of gas. What is the gas? Carbon dioxide. So the ratio is 2:1. So the ratio is 2:1. And which moles will we use? We will use the moles of HCl because that is your limiting reagent. And the product always depends on the limiting reagent. So you will do 0.05 is to X. And the X comes out to be 0.05 divided by 2, which is 0.025 moles of carbon dioxide. You need to find the volume. You will do moles is equals to volume upon 24 dm cube. You multiply the moles by 24 and the volume comes out to be 0.6 dm cube. Clear? Is this clear? If they would have given you that HCl is in excess, then you would not have had to find the limiting reagent. You would have known copper carbonate is limiting. Yes? Or if they would have said copper carbonate is in excess, HCl is limiting, you would not have had to find it. But since here they have not told you and quantities of both the reagents are given to you, you will first have to find the limiting quantity, and using the moles of that, you will have to find the moles of product and convert that to volume. Is this clear? Is this clear? All right. Moving on. Question number 3. Which statement about a 3p orbital is correct? So we know that p is a subshell. Yes? SPDF, they are subshells. S has 1 orbital, P has 3 orbitals. How many subshells will you have in the third shell? If it is shell number 3, it will have 3 subshells. It will have 3s, 3p and 3d. S has 1 orbital, P has 3, D has 5. Yes? Now they are saying about a 3p orbital, about just 1 orbital. Yes, they're saying it can hold a maximum of 6 electrons. Is that true? No, an orbital can occupy a maximum of 2 electrons. If they would have said the 3p subshell can occupy 6 electrons, you would have said yes. But it says 3p orbital. Orbital can occupy only 2 electrons. It is the highest energy of orbitals with the principal quantum number 3. Is that true? Does it have the highest energy compared to the other orbitals in third shell? No, the highest energy is of 3d. 3d has more energy than 3p. It is at a higher energy level than a 3s orbital. Is that true? Yes. But it has the same shape. Is that true? No, p is dumbbell. S is spherical. So 3s is spherical. P is dumbbell. That's not true. It is occupied by 1 electron in an isolated phosphorus atom. So let's see phosphorus. Phosphorus has 15 electrons. So it will be, the configuration would be 1s2, 2s2, 2p6, 3s2. We fill 12 electrons. And then you will have 3p3. How will we fill the 3s2? 1 and 2. How will we fill the 3p3? 1, 2, 3. Why? Because of the Hund's rule, where you fill the degenerate orbitals singly first and then you pair up. So do you see? an isolated phosphorus atom will have one electron in a 3p orbital. That is true. Do you see that? Therefore, the answer is D. The 8 species that follow all have covalent bonds. In which pair do the species have different shapes from each other? By now, you should remember the shapes. I told you to figure out the shapes using steric number. Let's see. Let's see how do we determine the steric number. What is steric number? Steric number is basically the number of sigma bonds plus the number of lone pairs around the central atom. So let's see. Your steric number can be 6. If your steric number is 6, your hybridization is sp3d2. Remember I told you this hybridization is not part of your syllabus, but if you get a steric number of 6, hybridization is sp3d2. So S1 P3D2. 1 plus 3 plus 2 gives you the steric number 6. And what will be the shape? The shape would be octahedral. What will be the bond angles? 90 and 180. What is an example? SF6. Let's see if your steric number is 5. Hybridization is sp3d1. The 1 plus 3 plus 1 gives you 5. What is the shape? Trigonal, bipyramidal. What will be the angles? 120 and 180. What will be the example? PCl5. Steric number 4, hybridization would be sp3. Let's see if you have 0 lone pairs, what will be your shape? Your shape would be tetrahedral. Angle would be 109.5. An example is CH4, SiCl4, CCl4. Yes. If your steric number is 4, hybridization is sp3. If you have 1 lone pair, then the angle will not be 109.5. It will decrease by 2.5. It will be 107. Shape will be trigonal, pyramidal. Just like an example is ammonia. Yes. If you have a steric number 4 with hybridization sp3, and if you have 2 lone pairs, then the shape would be bent. You can also call it angular. You can also call it V shape. You can also call it non-linear. So this would have a bond angle of 104.5. An example is water. Yes. And if your steric number is 3, the hybridization would be sp2. Shape would be trigonal planar. Bond angle would be 120. An example is ethene, AlCl3, BF3. These are all examples of sp2. And if your steric number is 2, hybridization is sp. Shape is linear. Angle is 180. An example is ethine, C2H2. What else? CO2. What else? BeCl2. These are all sp hybridized. Clear? So now let's see. They are saying which species have different shapes. So BeCl2 is linear. Carbon dioxide is also linear. They both have the same shape. Can't be the answer. CH4 is tetrahedral. What is ammonium ion? Also tetrahedral. Therefore, can't be the answer. Ammonia is trigonal pyramidal. BF3 is trigonal planar. Do you see they both have different shapes? The answer therefore is C. Can't be D either. SCl2 is just like water. You have S, Cl, Cl. You have 2 lone pairs and 2 sigma bonds. And therefore, this is just like water. This is bent angular. So these are both bent. Can't be the answer. Clear? Now, let's find the bond angles, since we've already done the table where we have seen hybridization and how the steric number gives you the bond shape and angles. Let's now, using the steric number, find the bond angles, right? Let's see. You have bond angle 1. What is the central atom in bond angle 1? Carbon. How many sigma bonds around it? 1, 2, and 3. Because in a double bond, 1 is sigma, 1 is pi. So you have 3 sigma bonds. How many lone pairs? 0. Why? Because carbon is in group 4. It has 4 outer electrons. Do you see all 4 electrons are making bonds? Therefore, it has 0 free lone pairs. So you have 0 lone pairs. Steric number would be 3. Hybridization would be sp2, because 1 plus 2 gives you steric number 3. If it is sp2, the bond angle would be 120. So 1 is 120. Let's see bond angle 2. What is the central atom? Nitrogen. How many sigma bonds around it? 3. How many lone pairs? 1, because nitrogen is in group 5. So it has 1, 2, 3, 4th and 5th is a lone pair. So steric number would be 4. Hybridization would be sp3 with 1 lone pair. The bond angle will not be 109.5. It will decrease by 2.5 roughly. It will be 107. So this is 107. Let's see 3. Which is the central atom in 3? This one. How many sigma bonds around it? 1, 2, 3, 4. How many lone pairs? 0. Why? Because carbon is in group 4. All 4 are making bonds. So no lone pairs. Steric number is therefore 4. Hybridization is sp3. And your shape would be tetrahedral, bond angle 109.5. Therefore, the answer is B. Yes? All right. All right. All right, guys. So, question number 6. So, let's see now. You will be able to solve it. So, question number 6. A sample of gas occupies 24 cm cube at 37 and 100 kilopascals. You need to find the number of moles of gas that are present. So let's see how will we find that. So you know that this is PV is equals to nRT. You will use the ideal gas equation to find the number of moles. So this would be PV is equals to nRT. Now for PV nRT, the pressure must be in pascals, volume must be in meters cube, temperature must be in Kelvin. Yes? How will we convert these? Let's see. 1 kilopascal has 1000 pascals. So you have 100 kilopascals here. So 100 will give you 100 times 1000. Yes? Then meters cube, centimeter cube to meters cube. Meter cube has 10 to the power 6 cm cube. And how many cm cubes do we have here? 240. So that will be this. And from degree Celsius to Kelvin, you just add 273. All right. So let's see. You have PV is equals to nRT. Pressure would be 100 kilopascals, which is 100 times 1000. Volume would be 240 divided by 10 to the power 6, or you can write this as 240 times 10 to the power minus 6 is equals to n, which is x, we don't know, value of r, with whatever is given in your data booklet, you use that. It is 8.314, the gas constant. Yes. And then we have the temperature. The temperature is 37 plus 273. And when you solve for this, your number of moles or x come out to be how much? They come out to be 9.3119 10 to the power minus 3. So the answer therefore is B. Clear? P, Q, and R, they represent 3 different structures of an element. So you have P, as you can see, this is graphite. Yes, layered structure. This right here, they're saying of an element. So these are basically allotropes of the same element. Graphite is made of carbon. So P is graphite, Q must be diamond. Yes, you can't mistake it for silicon dioxide because they're of the same element. Yes, and then R is Buckminster fullerene. Yes, or buckyball. Remember the C60? Yeah. Now, which of these is a giant macromolecule? We know that is P and Q. The answer therefore is B. Buckyball is an allotrope of carbon, but not a giant macromolecule. All right. The standard enthalpy change of combustion of hydrogen, carbon, and methanol are shown. Which expression gives the standard enthalpy change of formation of methanol? So what will we do first? We will write the equation for formation of methanol. What is formation? Where 1 mole of something is formed from its constituent elements in their standard state under standard condition. What will be the constituent elements? You will have carbon, solid, hydrogen, standard state is gas, oxygen, that is also gas. And you must be forming 1 mole. So you will have how many hydrogens to balance it out? You have 4 hydrogen here, so you put a 2 here. You have 1 oxygen here, so you put a half here. This right here is your enthalpy change of formation of methanol. You need to find this delta H. I told you that delta H can be found directly if combustion data is given to you. How can we do that? Delta HR would be combustion of reactants minus combustion of products. If combustion data is not given, and if, let's suppose, formation data is given to you, then also you can do it directly. How? Formation of product minus formation of reactants. Yes, but right here they have given you the combustion data. So you can do it directly. How? Combustion of reactants minus combustion of products. If formation data is given to you, remember it would be formation of products minus formation of reactants. Now let's see, what are the reactants? These are the reactants. Now let's see the combustion data that is given to you. So for carbon, it is given to you as minus 394 for 1 mole. And how many moles do we have here? 1. For hydrogen, 1 mole, they have given you minus 286. So that will be plus minus 286 times 2, because right here we have 2 moles. Yes. So this is combustion of reactant. Oxygen, when undergoes combustion, will give you more oxygen. So the combustion value is 0 for oxygen. Just like if you remember, formation of elements was 0. Just like combustion of oxygen is also 0. That's why they haven't given it to you here. Yes. So this is combustion of the reactants minus combustion of product. What is your product? This right here. What is the value of that? Minus 726. So what is your delta H? Minus 394 plus minus 286 times 2 minus 726. And your answer therefore is C. Clear? Yes? Question number 9. The equation for the chemical reaction is shown. All substances are in the standard state. Which statement explains the standard enthalpy change of reaction? What is enthalpy change of reaction by definition? It is where the molar quantities as given in the chemical reaction react to give the product. That is called enthalpy change of reaction. Yes, basically, in accordance to this equation, can I say enthalpy change of reaction is where 1 mole of XeF6 reacts with 3 moles of H2O, giving 1 mole of XeO3 and 6 moles of HF. That is enthalpy change of reaction, where molar quantities as in the equation react to give you the product. Now they're saying which statement is correct. Enthalpy change when total 1 mole of product is produced. Is that true? No. Are you making 1 mole of product here? No, you are making 1 mole of this and 6 moles of that. So that is not true. Enthalpy change when total of 1 mole of reactant is used. No, it is basically the moles as given in the equation. Are there only 1 moles here? No, there are 4. Not true. Enthalpy change when 1 mole of water reacts. Is there 1 mole of water in the reactor? No, 3 moles. Can't be true. Enthalpy change when 6 moles of HF are produced. Yes. So enthalpy change of reaction is where molar quantities as in the equation react to give you the product as given in the equation. That is called delta H or enthalpy change of reaction. Clear? Question number 10. Acidified potassium manganate reacts with iron 2-ethane dioate. The reaction is taking place as shown. Now we don't have iron ethane dioate. Do you see that? We have iron and ethane dioate ions separately. First thing that we need to do is make iron ethane dioate. We need to make this guy. All right. Let's see how we do that. The two half equations are given to you. Yes. So let me write these half equations. You have Fe2 plus giving Fe3 plus electron. Yes. And you have C2O4 2 minus giving 2 CO2 plus 2 electrons. What do I need to make? This iron 2 ethane dioate. All I need to do is add these two equations. I'm not flipping anything here. Why am I adding these two? So that when iron adds to ethane dioate, it gives you what? Iron 2 ethane dioate. This is what we need. So I will just add these two. You see, Fe2 plus with C2O4 2 minus, this 2 goes here, this 2 goes here, and you get Fe2, C2O4 2, the 2 cancels out, and you have FeC2O4. Do you see you've made that? Yes. So you just need to add these two equations. And when you add them, what will you get here? You will get FeC2O4. Yes. When you add this with this is what you get. On this side, you will get Fe3 plus 2 CO2. And how many electrons? 3. Done? We got this without flipping anything, without changing the electrons. We just added these two equations so that we could get iron 2 ethane dioate. Now we need to react that with manganate ions. So we've been given the equation of manganate ions right here. So let's write that equation down. So you have MnO4 minus plus 8H plus 5 electrons giving you Mn2 plus 4H2O. Now you need to react these two. You are reacting them now. Do you see? One of them is losing electron, one of them is gaining. You don't have to flip anything. All right. All you got to do now that they're reacting, it will be which type of reaction? Redox. Because one is losing, one is gaining. And when you need to write the overall equation for this, you will have to balance the electrons. So you will multiply this entire thing by 5 and this entire thing by 3. Electrons become 15 on both sides. You cancel them out. Yes. Let's write the rest of it. So that would become 5 FeC2O4 plus 3 MnO4 minus plus 3 8s are 24H plus becoming 5 Fe3 plus 10 CO2 3 Mn2 plus 12 H2O. Yes, got the overall? Now they are saying how many moles of ethane dioate iron to react with 1 mole of potassium manganate. So what is the ratio of ethane dioate with potassium manganate? 5:3. And how many moles of manganate do we have? 1. So 1 will react with how many? X. And this X comes out to be 5/3, which is 1.66666. So this comes out to be 1.67. Therefore, your answer is B. Clear? Yes. I'll move all this working there to the previous page so that we have space here. Question number 10. Done? Question number 11. When copper is added to a solution of silver ions, following equilibrium is established. They've given you the copper ions and they've given you silver ions. They've given you the Kc as well. If you remember, Kc, solids were never part of Kc expression because their concentration is constant. So copper will not be part of Kc, silver will not be part of Kc. What will be part of Kc? These two. And how do we write the Kc expression? It is concentration of products upon concentration of reactants raised to the power of their moles. Now they've given you the Kc, that is 1 times 10 to the power 5. Copper 2 plus ions, concentration is how much? At equilibrium, it is 0.1. They're asking you the concentration of silver. That will be x squared. And when you solve for this will be 0.1 divided by 10 to the power 5 under root, and this comes out to be 1 times 10 to the power minus 3 moles per dm cubed. The answer therefore is C. Question number 12. X, Y, and Z are elements in period 3 of the periodic table. The results of some experiments are carried out with compounds of these elements are shown. Now, we know period 3 elements are sodium, magnesium, aluminum, silicon, phosphorus, sulfur, chlorine, argon. No one really cares about argon, so I'm erasing that. All right. Now, because argon is unreactive, doesn't really make chlorides or oxides or anything. Yes, so that's why I erased it. Now, they're saying that to X, when you add water, it undergoes there's no reaction. All right. X can be one of these. It undergoes no reaction. When you add chloride of X to water, it hydrolyzes. Now, if you remember, they were ionic chlorides, yes, and they were covalent chlorides. What were ionic chlorides? NaCl, MgCl2. The rest of these were covalent chlorides. And if you add water to covalent chlorides, they undergo hydrolysis. And when you add ionic chlorides to water, they dissolve. So if this is hydrolyzing, it can definitely not be sodium or magnesium because it is hydrolyzing. Yes? Now they are saying, when you add the oxide to acid, it forms a salt. So when you add this oxide to acid, let's see the oxides. Sodium oxide, magnesium oxide, aluminum oxide, silicon dioxide, P4O10, sulfur dioxide. Do you remember that the oxides, these oxides, the non-metallic oxides were covalent and therefore they were acidic. So these oxides are acidic oxides. Can you add an acidic oxide to an acid and get a salt? No. Which oxide will give you a salt when added to an acid? Basic oxide. Now, or amphoteric. And you remember aluminum was amphoteric? Yes, it could react with both acid and alkali. So we already figured it can't be sodium magnesium based on the result of this. And now we know it can't be these guys because this is reacting, the oxide is reacting with the acid. And these guys give you acidic oxides. They can't react with acids. So it has to be either sodium, magnesium, or aluminum. And we've already figured out it can't be sodium, magnesium. Therefore, X is definitely aluminum. Clear? Clear? Now, Y forms hydroxide. So X is aluminum. X is silicon. No, X can't be silicon. So option A seemingly is correct. All right. Let's see Y. Now Y is aluminum, they are saying. Is Y aluminum? No, we've already figured out X is aluminum. So can C be the answer? No. So it can be A or D. Let's now see Y. Y is magnesium or Z is aluminum. It can't be D also because we know Z is not aluminum, X is aluminum. Answer is definitely A. Let's still check Y. Y is magnesium, they are saying. Let's check if this is magnesium or not. When you add it to water, it forms hydroxide. Do you remember group 2 metals, when you add them to water, they form hydroxide and hydrogen gas? Yes, that is true. When you add the chloride to water, it dissolves. What will be magnesium chloride? It will be ionic. Will it dissolve in water? Yes, this is true. When you add the oxide to HCl, it gives you a salt. Yes, because magnesium oxide is basic. With HCl, it will give you a salt. So this right here would be A, because Y is magnesium, X is aluminum. All right. 13. A solid period 3 element Q is reacted with oxygen gas. Now they're telling you it is solid. They reacted with oxygen gas. Compound R is formed. Okay, so they will all make oxides. What are your oxides? Sodium oxide, magnesium oxide, aluminum oxide. You have silicon dioxide, you have phosphorus, you have sulfur dioxide, sulfur trioxide. Yes? Now we know these two are ionic. This is amphoteric. These are covalent. When R is added to water, what is R? R can be either of these. When it is added to water, pH decreases. pH decreases means R must be acidic. And if it is acidic, that means it must be covalent, because covalent oxides are acidic. Ionic oxides are basic. Amphoteric are both. Yes? So definitely it can't be this. Yes? Now, what could be the empirical formula of R? Now, Q2O4, now R can be any of these. Let me equate this with Q. Q, Q4, Q, Q. So it could either be QO2, it could either be Q4O10, it could either be QO2, or it could either be QO3. Yes? Yes? If it's silicon, it is QO2. If it is phosphorus, Q4O10. If it's sulfur, QO2 or QO3. Yes? Now you need the empirical formula, which is the simplest formula. What will be the empirical formula of this? QO2. What will be the empirical formula of this? Q2O5. What is the empirical formula of this? QO2. What is of this? QO3. What is your answer? B. Q2O5. Clear? Can't be C. C is not an empirical formula. C is a molecular formula. Metal T reacts with water to produce colorless solution. White precipitate is produced when you add it with sulfuric acid. Very, very quick recall. If you see the options given here are group 2 and group 1 elements. Yes? If you remember, group 2 elements, they react with water to give you hydroxides. Do you remember? Magnesium gives magnesium hydroxide, which was a white precipitate. It was insoluble. Calcium would give calcium hydroxide, which was sparingly soluble, giving you a cloudy solution. Strontium hydroxide and barium were soluble, giving you a clear solution. You are getting a clear solution. That means it can be strontium or barium. Yes? So, not magnesium. Potassium, sodium, maybe. All right. White precipitate is formed when you add this thing to sulfuric acid. With sulfuric acid, what will you get? A sulfate. And do you remember barium sulfate was a white precipitate? Therefore, the answer is A. Yes? 15. When calcium nitrate decomposes, oxygen is one of the products. You must remember the decomposition equation and the ratio. So calcium nitrate decomposing to give calcium oxide, 2 moles of nitrogen dioxide, half a mole of O2. Remember the ratio. So let's see. You have what volume of oxygen is produced when 0.5 moles of nitrate decomposes. So you have 0.5 moles of this. What is the ratio? 1 is to half. 1 is to half. So if this is 1 is to 0.5, and if this is 0.5, what will be your moles of oxygen? 0.25. You need to find the volume. So you know 0.25 is equals to volume upon 24. So that will be 0.25 times 24, and the volume comes out to be 6 dm³. Clear? Lm and N are group 2 metals. L reacts more vigorously with hydrochloric acid than N does. M hydroxide is more soluble than N hydroxide. If you remember group 2 elements, magnesium, calcium, strontium, barium. If you remember, the hydroxide of this was insoluble. If you remember the hydroxide of this, which was partially soluble, this is soluble, and that is the most soluble. Yes? Yeah? Now, based on M and N, can we Eliminate a few options. Let's see. M is more soluble than N. Is calcium more soluble than strontium? Is calcium more soluble than strontium? No. Can it be A? No. Is strontium more soluble than calcium? Yes. Can be the option. Can be the answer. Is barium more soluble than strontium? Yes. Can be the answer. Is calcium more soluble than barium? No. Can't be the answer. You eliminated A and D. Now they are talking about the reactivity. L reacts more vigorously than N. What happens to the reactivity down the group? Reactivity increases. Why? Because ionization energy decreases. So they can react because they become ions easily. Yes? So which will be more reactive? Barium or strontium? Barium. And they are saying L is more reactive than N. Sorry. L is more reactive than N. Is barium more reactive than calcium? Yes. The answer therefore is B. Can't be C. Is calcium more reactive than strontium? No, strontium is down the group. It is more reactive. Clear? All right. Table shows some reaction of white compound G. Silver nitrate is added, followed by ammonia. The precipitate is formed, which does not dissolve when ammonia is added. Which precipitate do you think this is? Iodide. Because that is the precipitate which does not dissolve with ammonia. Do you remember that? Now you'll be like, but miss, this is white. We studied that was yellow. White, cream, yellow. They all look the same to naked eye. Yes, that's why we confirm by adding ammonia. If the precipitate does not dissolve, it is iodide. And then they're saying, you warm it with sulfuric acid, it gives a gas called hydrogen sulfide, one of the gases. Do you remember sodium iodide with H2SO4 gives what? HI plus NaH, SO4. And then this HI further reacts with H2SO4, giving you what? I2 and H2S. Remember the rotten egg smell of hydrogen sulfide? So definitely this must have iodide ion. And therefore the answer is D. That's the only one which has iodide. Under standard conditions, which statement is correct? Chlorine can oxidize bromide ions. If you remember the oxidizing power of halogens, down the group, what happens to their oxidizing power? It decreases. Fluorine is the strongest. Then chlorine is relatively strong, not so strong, but stronger than obviously bromine. And iodine is the weakest oxidizing agent. And this is the strongest oxidizing agent. And then their reducing power. The reducing power is of the ions. It is of the ions. So you will have fluoride ion, which is the least. You have chloride, then you have bromide, iodide. The strongest reducing power is of iodide. Yes? Chlorine can oxidize bromide, can it? Is chlorine a strong oxidizing agent? Yes. Can it oxidize bromide? Yes. The answer therefore is A. Ammonia and hydrazine. You know hydrazine is N2H4. They are two compounds of nitrogen which is N2. And you have ammonia which is NH3. Yes? They are saying that NN bond in N2H2 is polar. In hydrazine, they are saying, is the NN bond polar? Can it be polar? No, why? Because their electronegativity will be the same. So if the electronegativity is the same, cannot be polar. So it cannot be polar because of the same electronegativity. Ammonia and N2H4, the lone pairs, but nitrogen does not have lone pairs. Is that true? No, nitrogen also has lone pairs because in nitrogen, each nitrogen atom is making how many bonds? 3. So fourth and fifth will be a lone pair. Fourth and fifth will be a lone pair. Oxidation number of nitrogen in N2H4 is +2. So this is N2H4. Let's see. Can I call it 2x plus 4 times +1 is equals to 0? X comes out to be -2, not +2. This is wrong. Therefore, the answer is D. And let's see option D. It says reaction of nitrogen. What is nitrogen? N triple bond N. With hydrogen has a high activation energy. Remember I told you nitrogen is mostly unreactive. Why? Because of the triple bond. And if it is reacting, it will require high amounts of activation energy to break the triple bond. And therefore, the answer is D. Last question, 20. How many structural isomers do you have of trichloropropane? So let's try and make isomers of trichloropropane. 3 chloros. Let's see, where will I attach them first? All three on the first carbon. What will we call this? 1,1,1 trichloropropane. Then let's change the position. Let's put it on 1, 1 and 2. Let's call this 1, 1, 2. Then let's change the position and let's put it on 1, 2, 2. This becomes 1, 2, 2. Then let's change the position. Put them on 1, 2 and 3. 1, 2, 3. Let's change the position. Let's now, you'll be like, okay, let's make it on 2, 2 and 3. This is not 2, 2 and 3. This is 1, 2, 2. We've already done that. Then you will be like, okay, let's put it on 1, 3, 3. So this is not really 1, 3, 3. You will start numbering from here because most of the CLs will get the least number here. So we will call this 1, 1, 3. All right. Or if you make it like this also, this is the same. If you put 2 here and 1 here, this is also 1, 1, 3. All right. There's no 1, 3, 3. It will be 1, 1, 3. Clear? So how many isomers do we have? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Can you make a chain isomer of this? No, because if you try to shorten the chain, the third carbon will either go here, main chain will again become 3, or it will go here. If it goes here, again the main chain becomes 3. So you can't have a chain isomer, just positional. And how many isomers do we have? 5. The answer therefore is C. Is this clear? Do you all get it? Any questions?